Hypothetical Utopia number 3, success theory. Is what we're gonna do here is we're gonna explore an idea that I had a few weeks ago about how you could arrange a certain kind of utopia. This video is weird in that it has a prerequisite, which is the Maslow video that I did. That video pretty much directly leads into this one because what I'm going to be talking about are Maslow Goods, at least partially. So what success theory is, what we're interested in is we're interested in analyzing how to distribute level 5 Maslow goods within a utopia, within a world where all the other levels of goods are satisfied for the individual members of society. That's how we define utopia for, semantics sake, is all the goods, levels 1 to 4 goods are all, level 1 to 4 desires of every member of society are satisfied for every single person, every single individual, or every single entity capable of having that desire, I suppose, which extends to non-humans and stuff as well. Yeah, and that's a well-defined state. That's a possible state to reach. Now, notice I didn't say an equal distribution of level 1 to 4 goods, just a distribution in which level 1 to 4 desires are satisfied. It's not necessarily an equal, but it's going to be more or less equal, I think. So the question here with is how do we distribute level 5 goods? How do we distribute success? And that's what level 5 good essentially is. Or at least I'm going to justify that a little bit in a second, because I think how to distribute level 5 Maslow goods is intimately tied with a question of, success. What is success? What is someone who is successful, and how do you measure success? Now, because we live in a world where scarcity is, or not even scarcity, but a lack of resources to keep oneself alive and keep one's family alive and continue one's existence in comfort. Success is typically associated with the ability to own and have a certain amount of property and wealth and all that stuff. That's usually what people think of when they think of success. I think success isn't just that, or at least that's not the type of success that we're looking at here. The type of success we're interested in is personal success, or self-actualized success. Self-actualization, it's the type of thing where you are not successful unless you accomplish the thing you set out to accomplish, which is a personal goal for you. Why you have this goal, it really depends, but it's the type of thing where an individual is not happy unless they are doing the very thing that makes them happy. And when they are doing that thing and they consider themselves happy, they are successful. Now, to some people that means make a boatload of money and own a lot of wealth, and that's usually a mistake, a social mistake. Maybe, there could be this whole cultural stigma which reinforces people's view that is what success is. But for other people, success is something very personal. Success is something that's not, it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with how much wealth you have. It has to do with what kind of product you've created, or the kind of service you've provided, or how you've helped, what you've produced for the species. And basically all art is within the level 5 category of Maslow goods. All artistic goods are essentially level 5 goods. They're level 5 goods to the people who make them, and they're at least partial level 5 goods for the people who consume them. So, what we're asking about is how do you distribute this kind of success? How do you distribute the self-actualized kind of success? And to some of you that question might sound a little weird. It's like, how do you distribute personal success? That doesn't even make sense. It's not like you can build it's not like you can come up with a service where people can come up to the service and be handed out success, right? It's like, oh, here's your success, sir, that'll cost you $5,000. No, you can't do that, right? You don't just sell success, right? It's not, but that doesn't mean it can't be distributed. Right? Distributing something, when I say distribute something, I'm not implying that you hand it out physically. What I'm questioning is how should it be distributed within society by any possible force. It could be by just free chaotic forces. It doesn't have to be distributed by an entity or a aspect of society. It could just be distributed by people's cultural impulses. What I'm questioning is what state of distribution is preferable. I'm not actually trying to come up with a way to physically, mechanically distribute it to individuals, right? That's a different issue, right? I'm just sort of, this is a more abstract thing where it's like, what kind of distribution is better than other kinds of distributions? And before we get into that, let's assume a few things. So we're in a utopia, right? So we're in a world where level 1 to 4 goods are satisfied. Now, in the other two utopias I came up with in this series, there's the minimalist empathy virtue one, where what you had was people, basically technology had a huge role to play. It had a huge role to play in that one, in that everyday tasks were more or less taken care of by machines, and there were people that still had to, do boring old practical things to try to keep society, running, functioning. But most people were doing the self-actualization thing, and the way the self-actualization was distributed within that society was through the free market. There was just a free, so sort of just no attempt at focusing resources anywhere when it came to self-actualization. More or less, I don't quite remember, but that would qualify as a minimalistic utopia. The second example was the Brave New World utopia, where you don't really try to distribute success in the Brave New World either. What you do in the Brave New World is you give people drugs and you condition them to be very hedonistic, and any kind of success is just a result of that impulse. So most people don't really seek success within the Brave New World. So in other words, what the Brave New World is it's a utopia where level 5, there is no level 5 marketplace. The level 5 Maslow Goods more or less don't exist because level 5 desires almost don't exist. And what the book was about how the people who actually do have level 5 desires within the Brave New World, how they have to face it, how they cope with it, and how the problems that they run into. That's off topic. That's with the Brave New World example. Here it's just more generally, what are we, how do we distribute level 5 goods, right? Okay, so let's assume that everyone in this world, in this utopia where level 1 to 4 goods are satisfied for everyone, let's assume that every single person has some time available. They have spare time. They have enough time that they can dedicate the time to a personal self-actualization project. They can focus their time on providing themselves or providing others with a level 5 good. So right off the bat, this is a world where the level of technology has to be pretty intense that people don't really have to worry about, or people have enough time to focus on level 5 goods without having to worry about level 1 to 4 goods. But I'd say that's typical because I think any kind of utopia, by the definition that I gave earlier, would be a world where the level of technology is incredibly immense compared to what we have today. So they have plenty of time. They have some time. It doesn't matter how much time, because we're not really interested in the scope of the projects. We're just looking at the structure of the projects that these people have. They're level 5 projects. So let's Okay, first, when it comes to self-actualization, there's two kinds of self-actualization, right? There's the kind of self-actualization that I can do on my own in a room, without having anyone without having anyone be present, right? There's the kind of self-actualization where I can live alone in the woods without interacting with society by myself. I can construct something. I can build something with my hands. I can solve a puzzle, like solving a crossword puzzle, or solving some kind of simple puzzle, putting puzzle pieces together. And it's something very simple that I basically don't need anybody else to do. Or, writing. I can write a book, or I can write a paper or something. These are all examples of private forms of self-actualization. Well, partially, because the other kind of self-actualization is the opposite. It's obviously public self-actualization, where the thing that you're creating or the thing that you're participating in requires involvement of other people. For example, making a video on YouTube. This is a public form of self-actualization. It's self-actualization because I would not be satisfied with myself if I didn't voice my opinion online, maybe. It's public because the very structure of the medium sort of is predicated on the idea that I want to share this content. I wouldn't make these videos if I lived alone on planet Earth. If there was nobody to share these videos with, there'd be no point. The whole point is this is a communication medium. This is used to communicate with people, right? Same thing with literature, really, which is why the book example isn't quite private. I mean, it's private in the way that it's done. I can write a book by myself, but it's a public level 5 good because I want other people to read the book, right? I'm not just writing it for myself. I could just write it for myself. I mean, that exists. I could just write a book without having anyone intend to read it except myself. It's a little weird, but most people, they write a book, they want other people to read it. That's the intention there. Other people to experience the story and relate to it and relate to me because I wrote the story, or relate to the experiences of the characters that I wrote about, etc. It's a whole relatability thing, which means it's just another form of human communication. Same thing with YouTube, and the same thing with film and most forms of art, and honestly most level 5 goods in general. It's always about trying to relate to another person in some way, which means it's about communication, which means it's something that you want other people to experience. It is not... The intention there is to have other people experience it. The intention is not in and of itself. That's why I kind of get a little... I get a little pedantic when people say stuff like, well, this is a weird example, but it's like, let's say someone's wearing flashy clothes or wearing makeup, or someone saying I'm out of makeup, and ask us, say, okay, well, why are they wearing that? And say, well, they're not doing it for anyone else, they're doing it for themselves. And I mean, that's just a lie. Like, that is a complete fabrication, right? Because there's no way that's not how that medium works. If you lived alone in the universe, you would not wear makeup, you would not wear flashy clothes. Let's say machines took care of all of your menial needs and you could somehow live without other people involved. It's hard to imagine, but try to imagine it. Would you honestly have the impulse to wear makeup? No, of course not. Would you have the impulse to wear a costume? No, probably not, unless you look at yourself in the mirror all the time. Generally, you wear things because you want to elicit some kind of reaction from people. You don't... I mean... No, not even generally, just instinctively. That's how it works. It's not something you do purely for yourself. There's almost nothing that you do purely for yourself, except for, like I said, solving some kind of really simple puzzle on paper or something. That might be something that is personal, because that will present a personal sense of satisfaction to the person who does it. It's not something that they really do because they want other people to see it or experience it. No, I'm not trying to diminish people who wear flashy clothes or wear makeup and say like, oh, they're just trying to get a reaction out of other people. I'm not saying that that's bad. I'm not saying that that's something people shouldn't do. I'm just saying that that's how it works. You do it because you're trying to get a reaction. You know, that doesn't make it inherently selfish or inherently, what do I want to say, shallow. No, that's just how that works. You know, people can do that. They can try, like writing a book is the same exact thing. You want people to read the book. Making a YouTube video, same exact thing. You want people to watch the video. You know, making a movie, you want people to watch the movie, and so on and so forth. Anything that is made with an audience in mind is not done purely for the individual, is what I'm trying to say. It's done with an audience in mind, which is what sort of how makeup and flashy clothes work. That's a different issue, and that's honestly not even that's not something to really object to. That's my point here isn't about that, even if I'm wrong about that. It's not even about that. What it's about is that there are most things that human beings do are not done for personal self-actualization. They're done for public self-actualization. You know, you're not doing something just because you want to feel good about it. You're doing it because you want other people to react to it in a way as well. You know, you want to be recognized for what you've done. If you weren't going to be recognized for it, you might be there might be less incentive to do it. At least I think that that's what most self-actualization, what it looks like, with the exception of like very few things that you could imagine doing on a uninhabited island, a deserted island. So the question is, obviously, let's say that everyone has enough time to do whatever private form self-actualization project that they have. Easy, you know, solve a puzzle, write a book for yourself that only you intend to read, wear makeup and look at yourself in the mirror. Let's actually think about the level 5 goods that are supposed to be intended for the public, that are there for an audience. And this is where we have I think what we have at this point is a very sort of interesting theory, because any way you try to distribute this kind of good, any distribution of these kinds of goods isn't necessarily preferable to any other distribution of these goods. At least that's what I think. There is no inherent, at least from my, just intuitively, there is no inherent preferable best way to distribute level 5 goods, public level 5 goods, that is better than any other way. In fact, every single way to distribute them has flaws and merits that the other methods don't. So before I get into that, and I'm going to elaborate what I mean by that, but I'm just going to sort of make a small distinction. Is here, okay, with self-actualization, right? What a self-actualization good is it's a self-actualization project, right? It's something, you know, it's some kind of work that you have to do to attain a goal, right? That's what self-actualization is. It's, you know, you have a goal set in mind and you want to attain that goal. So you have to do some kind of work. That is, we call that a project, right? Now that project could be anything, you know, the project could be writing a book, or it could be putting on makeup, or, you know, solving a crossword puzzle, or, I don't know, building a chair, or something, anything creative, right? It all involves creativity. It all involves a lot of it involves some kind of artistic medium, but it's all creative and all of it is personal. Okay. But then there's small projects and then there's big projects. How do we distinguish between the two? Well, just for simplicity's sake, a small project is a project that a person can do on their own. And all private self-actualization projects that I mentioned earlier, the ones that aren't looking for a reaction in others, in an audience, those are all small projects. They can't be big projects, because what a big project is a project that involves the work of multiple individuals. So for instance, if I want to write a book, I can do that by myself, but if I want to make a movie, I need the involvement of, I mean, I can still make a movie on my own, but to make sort of the scope of filmmaking, right, is a lot bigger. You know, to make a real movie, a sort of a big, high-budget movie with explosions, I need lots of other people to help me, right? So what we're looking at there is that is a big project, you know, that involves the cohesive, sort of consorted, I forgot the right word, but it involves the efforts and contributions, equal efforts and contributions of multiple individuals. And then there are small projects that involve the contributions of just a few individuals. Obviously, all private self-actualization projects are small projects, but there are also public self-actualization projects that are small projects. Putting on makeup is a public self-actualization project, by my argument that I made earlier, that involves you basically just doing something yourself. Of course, there's more to it because someone has to create the makeup and someone has to create the good for you to be able to put it on. So there is more effort behind that, but again, just let's assume that those resources are already existing and no one has to produce them, just to look at the structure of this thing, right? Just assume that. And what you have is the actual project that where the product that you're making is you in makeup in a costume. That involves you doing something. That doesn't really involve other people doing anything. Not necessarily. Or you building a chair out of wood or something, or you writing a book. I mean, all of these things, that they are things that are one-person projects, more or less. Without looking at the actual materials and resources that were required to make those projects happen. Of course, I think that those materials and resources would be plentiful within a utopia, where level 1 to 4 goods are satisfied, but that's besides the point. And a big project is obviously a project where you need lots of people to commit and work together and, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not compete, it's the opposite of compete. Yeah, whatever. The other people have to work together and to finish the project. Big versus small projects. And my point is, so the question within the distribution question is, do you want there to be more big projects or more small projects? Or do you want there to be just one big project that everybody's participating in, or nothing but small projects that every single individual is doing on their own? No matter how you distribute it, I don't think any of the distributions are any preferable than any other distribution. Again, intuitively, that's my perception of it. There's no inherently best distribution, without taking into account circumstance and whatever's happening, you know, in the universe, and maybe whether resources are plentiful and stuff. I mean, assuming everything else is held fixed and we're not looking at the other variables, there's no inherently best distribution. However, every single distribution does have its merits and its flaws. So let's take, for example, a distribution where everybody on Earth, every single person within this utopic world, is making a small project on their own, right? And obviously, people have the time, rather. They have a certain amount of time to focus on a small project, and any other time that they have may be spent on supplying society with the resources that are necessary to create the small projects in the first place, right? Like in order to write a book, you need a computer and you need some kind of program to write a book. If you want to put makeup on yourself, you need someone to create the makeup. So, let's assume that part of the time that people are spending is spent on creating these things, and the other time, the time that's left, they are spending that time on focusing on their small project. Well, for this YouTube channel, for instance, this is a small project. This is something that I do by myself. This is something that no other person, needs to be involved in. Well, there's pluses and there's minuses to this distribution. The pluses are that everyone gets to self-actualize equally. and nobody necessarily has to commit or nobody has to commit to working on a big project that might not be their vision or might not be their self-actualized project. Nobody has to fall into that. Nobody has to commit to somebody else's work. They can just do whatever they want. It's pretty much, ultimate liberty. The flaw is that not a single big project could ever be made, because this is a world, because the way big projects work is this: inherently somebody involved in a big project will have more to do with the creative process than someone else. Big projects are not equal parts everyone when it comes to creativity and self-actualization. If it's a movie, there's usually someone who is at the top of it, the director, who controls everything that goes on and has all the influence, and it basically has the role of putting his vision, their vision, onto the screen. Now, there's a lot of people that are involved in the production process, but most of them have no say in what actually goes on screen. They're just there to perform a function. They're there to be drones, essentially, to commit to the project by the creative whims of the director. Right? But it's that person's self-actualization. Everybody else is just sort of playing their part to help the director or the people on top to fulfill their self-actualization instincts. At least in terms of the level 5 distribution of it all, right? Not everybody involved in the process is as involved in the project, is my point. Like, not everyone involved in doing the work has an equal stake in the work. Not everyone involved in the work has the same level 5 desire to see the work made. The person who is creatively in charge, that is their level 5 work, that is something that they are invested in, that is their self-actualization project, that is their self-actualization. That is not the self-actualization of the employees. So, because, by definition, as I said, a world where there's nothing but small projects is a world where every single person is focusing on their self-actualization, this cannot be a world with big projects, because big projects require for some people to put their self-actualization aside for a moment and help somebody else, self-actualize. It's the people working on a movie have to put their self-actualization aside, and they're just making money, but they put their self-actualization aside while the people in charge, the directors, the people creatively in charge, they're the ones who actually self-actualize within that. That's more or less the way I see it. Because, right, and obviously we're assuming that this is a world where people's ideas for self-actualization are very similar, but I do think that this is more or less how it works. The vast majority of people involved in the production of a film aren't actually self-actualizing. They're just, they might find it fun, they might find it enjoyable, but they're making money and they're focusing on some other Maslow good. They're not they're not self-actualizing but by performing their specific role. Unless they are, in which case it's great, in which case you can have big projects. You can have big projects in a world where everyone is equally self-actualizing. Not my point. My point is, there is an equal amount of, if there is an equal amount of self-actualization, if every single person has an equal amount of level 5 goods, if you distribute success equally to everyone, then this is the equivalent, more or less the equivalent, of no big projects existing, and what you're getting is a universe where there are loads of people and they are all making small projects on their own. And most of these projects won't ever be seen, because most of these projects will only be seen by them and a few people that are interested in them. And just given the sheer level of content that's being created, this is imagine like it with YouTube. This is the equivalent of every single person on earth making a YouTube video like this one on their own. That's what that looks like. And that's, nobody has the time to watch all of those videos, right? So the flaw with that design is that, two flaws. One is that not everything produced can be experienced by everyone. And two, big projects are less likely to happen. Just because inherently, like even if everyone, not everyone involved in a big project is self-actualizing, so big projects are less likely to happen. So, well, you can correct the first problem. So you can correct the first problem, the problem where not everything gets to be experienced. You can correct this, but what it would require is an insane level of technological advancement that our species is incapable of. What you'd essentially need is you need to make an individual within this society would have to be like a supercomputer. They'd have to be able to simultaneously create their own, create their personal self-actualization project, and have the time to experience everybody else's, right? And experiencing everybody else's, let's say you have 5 hours in the day, you can't watch every single kind of YouTube video that every other person makes, right? No, but what you can do is you can do it is if you watch multiple videos at once, right? I mean, again, take the YouTube analogy here. Let's assume that everyone is just making YouTube videos in this universe. The only way to experience everything is if every single individual is watching every video at once whilst making their own, or as well as making their own. That is a lot of functionality and a lot of processing that human beings aren't capable of. So this universe could only ever be possible if we aren't human. We are superhuman, AI super monster creatures that are capable of insane feats of computation. Like they can. It's the equivalent of like holding 7 billion conversations at once. That's what it is. It's being able to listen to 7 billion people talk to you at once and talk to all of them back at once. It's a very, very elaborate hive mind where there are 7 billion. Every single person is having 7 billion conversations at once, right? So it's 7 billion times 7 billion. It's 7 billion squared conversations happening at once. That's the level of computation that this world is capable of. That's an insane amount of stuff. So we're not anywhere close to this kind of utopia, but that is a possible utopia. And that would actually be the state at which you get that's the level at which you get the appropriate. See, that would be a world where everyone has their level 1 to 4 desires met and their level 5 desires met, because their level 5 desires are to create 7 billion conversations and hear 7 billion conversations happening. Yeah, their level are to create 7 billion conversations and whatever. You get my point. The everyone's instinct is to create a small project, which is to talk to everyone and listen to what everyone has to say. So very hard to accomplish, but possible, theoretically. Again, theoretically possible within the limitlessness of technology and science and all that. But nowhere close to what we have today. So, is that necessarily the most preferable kind of distribution of level 5 goods? Probably not. I mean, it's not the most preferable. Again, it has a flaw. It has, no matter what, even if you eliminate the flaw that not everything gets to be experienced, what you're still going to have is, you're going to have the flaw where there are no big projects. See, the issue with this kind of arrangement is that if every single individual in this world is capable of carrying out 7 billion conversations at once, they're capable of creating, they're capable of self-actualizing, 1, and 2, they're capable of broadcasting their self-actualized public project to everyone, and 3, experiencing everybody else's self-actualized project all at once, then they can be capable of a lot more. A computer like this that can do 7 billion conversations at once could also, I mean, imagine if instead of focusing on, sort of spreading its efforts, to include everyone, it instead focused on just a small number of people, or on just a small, so it focused all of its efforts on one task rather than all of its efforts on 7 billion tasks. Well, then that one task would be done really, really well. In other words, imagine what I just sort of explained, but instead of all of these individuals having conversations with each other, some of them stop, and what they get together and they decide to make a movie, or they decide to make something very, very elaborate. Well, what would you have then? Well, then they'd be capable of making, incredibly tremendous, amazing, big projects, given the sheer computation power that they have for carrying out experiencing and creating 7 billion small projects. So, is that preferable though? Well, the opposite extreme of this is, let's say, instead of these 7 billion people all focusing on their own project, let's say that they're all focusing on one big project. Well, imagine again, the entire population is making one giant movie. Well, that's good, everyone would get to experience it, but the issue with that, the flaw with that, is it's a big project. It would be the biggest thing this society could ever make, has ever made. Well, there's also the time variables, how much time they spend on producing this one big project, but it would have the potential of being the single biggest piece of self-actualization that anyone in this world could ever make. And it would probably have the highest artistic quality of anything they could ever make. The flaw is that not everyone would be able to self-actualize in this scenario. Right? It's like what I said before. Not everyone involved in a big project is self-actualizing. Right? And this is a giant project. This is a project that everyone's participating in, which means chances are the vast majority of these people are not self-actualizing. There are definitely going to be lots of people that are self-actualizing in the process, lots of people at the top, but the vast majority of people will not. This will not be their project, this will not be their creativity, this will not be their vision, it'll be somebody else's. However, the result is still good. So, is that preferable to the first one? No. Again, they're more or less equal. The flaw here is that not everyone gets to self-actualize. The merit here is that a big project can be made. And then you obviously have a spectrum of possibility in between these two extremes. You have the one extreme where everyone is self-actualizing at once and there's no big projects, and you have the other extreme where no one is self-actualizing, or very few people are self-actualizing because there is just one big project. And then you have everything in between where however many people are sitting at home and self-actualizing personally, and then there's other groups of people that are focusing on big projects in which some of the people involved are not self-actualizing. And which of these is preferable? Well, my view, just again intuitively, is that no individual state along this spectrum is preferable. They're all equally preferable. However, what that means is, since each single one has a flaw, what that means is you don't want society to linger in any one of these states too long. Ideally, what you would have is you'd have a world where you can transition from one end of the spectrum to the other with relative ease, and you'd be able to sort of do a little bit of everything. And this way, what you would accomplish is you would accomplish projects of every size. You would have the smallest projects that are very personal to the individuals, and the smallest projects that have a situation where everyone gets to self-actualize, and you'd be able to go to the opposite extreme where one person gets to self-actualize, but it's a tremendous big project that is loved by everyone, and you get the parts in between where some people get to self-actualize and create huge projects and some people don't, but they're still willing to put in the effort to help the people who are self-actualizing. And in this middle situation, you'd still have other people who aren't focusing on a big project, but they are experiencing the big projects because they're the audience, and they're still creating their own small projects. You could have a bit of everything. You could have a society where we transition from one to the other. it would be very difficult to transition from like a hive mind to a non-hive mind. Actually, no. Every single circumstance is kind of hive mindish, because what you have here, what you have on this end is complete individuality. On this end is you have complete community. So this end here is essentially like communism, and this end here is like well, anarchy. And what you do is you can transition between the two. So society can become like a perfect society of drones during the communism extreme and create the big project that everyone gets to love for aeons to come, and you can go back to the little project where everyone's creating a little project. It's really interesting, is my point, to think about how to distribute these level 5 goods. And more or less, this is already kind of how it worked. Well, no, it's not on either extreme. What we have now is we're somewhere in the middle. If you look at something, if you look at filmmaking, you look at things like the filmmaking industry. You have people that are self-actualizing at the top. Usually the directors, the actors, some of the high-end personnel. But you have lots of people that are just there to, make money and move on. Lots of people there aren't really to self-actualize. They're just there because, the lack of resources, and they need resources. And then you have, smaller media like YouTube Medium or some kind of personal like Instagram or something, or social media. You have these other media where people get to personally self-actualize and create their profile page and make it all fancy however they like, and pictures of flowers or whatever, and they get to self-actualize on their own, but not everybody gets to see it. So, I mean, ideally you'd want to re-engineer the species in such a way that everyone gets to see everything that everyone creates, and you'd also be able to engineer the species to have the capacity to sort of unite and work together to create big projects to their own detriment for a time, to not self-actualize yourself, but to help someone else self-actualize. Help out on a movie set so that your friend can make his big vision for making the next Pulp Fiction or whatever, right? You get the idea. That's sort of what it looks like, what it would look like. And there are definitely things in place in today's society that sort of go against this. The fact that you have, a lot of film studios, they create, all these shitty sequels and cash grab movies. These films, they create a lot of bad films that don't make a lot of money, or they make a little bit of money so the executives still profit. These movies, they are not self-actualized movies. Very few people in place are actually doing this because this is their goal, this is their dream, to create this work of art. No, it's a shitty sequel that's there to make money. It's not there to self-actualize. Unless there's people involved to whom self-actualization is profiting, but that kind of self-actualization wouldn't really exist in this utopia. Right, so what you get today is, you get a lot of works, you get a lot of things in art and a lot of things on YouTube and just a lot of things in general that are not really self-actualized. They're there for profit. And, that's kind of a problem, because that type of thing, nobody is self-actualizing within that process, or very few people are. If someone is self-actualizing through profit, there's a much greater chance that many other people are not. But in a project where, the person in charge loves what they're doing and they really want to have a story in mind and they want to tell it and they want to make this brilliant movie, then that will actually motivate other people to help them out and see it not just as a means of making profit, but as something that is interesting, that the world deserves to see, because it is intrinsically valuable, not because it has, monetary value. And the way it works is, if you're someone who's creative and you're trying to self-actualize by creating a big, work of fiction or something, then once you've made your movie, or you've made your work of fiction, you probably relax for a moment, right? Because you're creatively spent. You just spent all this time, all this work on self-actualizing. You've attained your goal. Now you can sit down and rest and look at what other people are doing. And go home and watch some other people's movies, or play some video games, or read a book, and experience, be the audience for somebody else's self-actualization project. So what I actually think, what's an interesting sort of model is the why I brought up the spectrum is the spectrum you constantly have to change. You know, maybe you should oscillate from one end to the other, back and forth, but the society has constantly got to change who is self-actualizing and who's not. Even if we stay in just one spot in the spectrum, the people in charge of the projects, after they're done completing their projects, they have to step down, relax, experience other people's projects, and let somebody else take the reins and create their self-actualization project. You know, my friend just made an amazing movie. They finished making their movie. But they're tired and done, and they don't want to, they can relax. Now I can make my movie. That's the type of thing that's how it should work, right? Because first of all, you can't be creative nonstop. That's just not possible. It's not possibly mentally impossible, because it's too hard and you'd be too tired, and because it involves a lot of thinking and a lot of just effort. But also, that's the one reason why you'd want to take a break. Or the second reason is you want to see what somebody else can create. You don't want the same people to constantly be creating, to constantly be at the top creating film, because what that does is that decreases, that stagnates the medium and decreases the diversity of the kinds of projects that you're going to have. Which is why if society constantly oscillates along the spectrum, or moves from one state to another, you're constantly going to start changing who is making the project, who makes what. Actually, I mean, it doesn't even have to oscillate for you to change who is involved in the project. You could even be on the communist end of the spectrum, have one big project everybody's involved in, but first guy A is the guy at the top running the whole thing. After the project's done, guy A steps down and guy B shows up, and then we run guy B's project, and then everybody takes turns. And then you go through all 7 billion people and you start over, right? Something like that. Or some people just don't want to be at the top. They always want to be at the bottom, and they always want to just self-actualize in their personal way, which is why you wouldn't want to be on the communist end. You'd want to be somewhere in the middle. As the people that just want to self-actualize personally, they can stay down here and self-actualize personally, and then there's people who want to sort of be these world shifters, world movers. They want to organize a whole bunch of people beneath them and create this hierarchy to build their self-actualization project. They can do that. They want to do that. They can do that. But then once they're done with that, somebody else has to show up and take their place. Because there's no way that the same person in charge all the time could ever create a diversity within the medium. The same person in charge at the top will always create, the same thing or very similar sort of things. Even there are artists that have like a huge range about the kind of content they create, but even so, there's still a consistency there, and you can look at different filmmakers. They have different kinds of movies, but it's not that all of their movies are still stylistically the same because they're made by the same person. Compare that to the style of another filmmaker, and you'll see that there's more diversity there. And then if you have more diversity, you have more different kinds of art, then you have different kinds of art that can cater all different kinds of people's tastes, and you basically get more interesting kind of content. So no matter where you are on the spectrum, you definitely, unless you're on this end where everyone's self-actualizing nonstop, because this end it's a non-issue. It doesn't matter everyone's always self-actualizing. There are no big projects. If you're anywhere but on this end, and there are big projects existing within society that are being made, you do not want the same people in charge of the big projects every single time. You want there to be change. You want the people in charge to step down at some point, somebody else to take their place. And then maybe they could step back up again if they suddenly have a new blast of creativity, inspiration, or the person who took their place inspires them to create a new work of fiction, and then they go back into the thing. You know. So I create a movie, I'm creatively spent, then my friend creates a movie, and it's like it inspires me to make an even better movie, and then I organize another big project. But you see, just to see how it works. Again, I'm not actually trying to figure out ways. I think most of these systems, most of these distributions, could probably be self-regulating. You know, I don't think there needs to be some kind of institution that regulates all this stuff. I think this can all self-regulate. But again, you need to have the conditions. You need people. Everybody needs to have time. Everyone, the level 1 to 4 goods need to be satisfied for everyone. And what you need is you need everyone to be, you know, aware of the system and how it works and how the distribution works and where the distribution currently is and where you want it to be and stuff like that. And of course, you'd need superhuman machine people because you can't to be capable of these extremes, right? To be capable of uniting everyone to create one big project, or nobody uniting but everybody still experiencing everything. You know, no matter what you do in this situation, you want everything that is produced, every public level 5 good that is produced, you want it to be experienced by every member of the public. Just because morally, right? You want to maximize the amount that's produced, and because of how level 5 goods work, you know, every single person that watches the movie and gets enjoyment from it, you know, that is a plus, right? So you want everyone to watch the movie and you want everyone to get enjoyment from it. Or if it's a video, you know, you want everyone to watch the video, everyone to get enjoyment from it, to maximize the amount of joy that is produced, the amount of enjoyment and entertainment that is produced. You want to maximize that. So no matter what, you need to re-engineer the human fucking spirit and the human brain, but I'm assuming that's all possible. The only interesting thing is just the distribution, which is what I think. And honestly, where society would be, I have no idea. I think maybe around like 90-10, like 90% of, or maybe like a gradient, like, you know, so some people are, you know, there are bigger, there's a whole range of different kinds of projects in terms of size. There's the smallest projects that maybe like 90% of the population is making small projects and experiencing small projects, and the other 10% is making some big projects, and then maybe like 1% is making giant projects that involve the contribution of, you know, millions or millions of people. You get the idea, but this is essentially what you'd want, like a utopia that has sort of that has all level 1 to 4 goods satisfied. You know, if you want to, you know, this is how you'd want to distribute level 5 goods. And again, all of this sort of assumes that we have a universe where everyone is interested in creating level 5 goods, where every single human being has level 5 desires, which may not be true. You might have a world where everyone's just a hedonist and doesn't have level 5 desires. Some people don't have level 5 desires, or very few level 5 desires comparatively. You know, look at Brave New World. Very few people within that story have level 5 desires. Anyway, this has been a bit technical. If you didn't watch the Maslow video, this isn't going to make any sense. But if you did, yeah, it's just very interesting stuff to think about, and I really want to know, if anything, what people would think about distributing success within with distributing success. And notice how actually, no matter where you are on the spectrum, success is subjective, so success is distributed equally. So it's not distributed equally, but it's every single person's desire to be successful is satisfied at one point in time or another. Even if you're not the person in charge at the top of the hierarchy of a level 5 project, of a big level 5 project, you will still get your turn. So you will still get your success later on, so long as you wait your turn. That is the idealistic structure of this whole thing. Let me know what people think, because yeah, this is just creative philosophy 101, and yeah. Cheers!